Marilyn Manson? Is that who's causing all this?
Yeah, it's all him or her's fault. Who does he or she think he or she is? Look, you can totally see his or her nipples. That's obscene, maybe.
Today we are ranking the albums of Marilyn Manson through the new record One Assassination Under God, but we're starting at the beginning with Portrait of an American Family in 1994. Open on Manson's take on the crazy boat ride part of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, setting the edgy tone going right into Cake and Sodomy. It seems clear that Manson was determined to scare the straights from the very beginning. Digging the more industrial energy of Lunchbox with a touch of Ministry in there, killer bass, syncopated vocals, and use of synth on Organ Grinder. I can already hear him figuring out his formula for singles on this one. Same goes for the bouncy early classic of Dope Hat. Other standouts here, Get Your Gun, Snake Eyes and Sissies, and Misery Machine. Lots of great ideas and sounds, just maybe not quite as honed in and sharpened as on the albums to come, so I'm going to put this one at fantastic. Great start though. Follow that up with Antichrist Superstar in 1996. Recorded at Nothing Studios in the home of the Manson murders and produced by Manson, Sean Beavan, former Skinny Puppy producer Dave Ogilvy, and Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails. Talk about a perfect storm. Also the first in a conceptual trilogy about an Antichrist figure. Killer opening in Irresponsible Hate Anthem, really setting the nihilistic tone, and then going into the career-making single The Beautiful People as well as Tourniquet. But even the bigger songs aside, there are so many great deeper cuts here, like Deformography, Mr. Superstar, Angel with Scabbed Wings, The Reflecting God, and that incredible, very pretty Hate Machine bass line of Dried Up, Tied Up, and Dead to the World. A lot of my favorite moments have more to do with a more minimalist, eerie vibe as opposed to the all-out anthems, but every song feels like this cocoon filled with pure vitriol, and over the course of its runtime that pupates and evolves into something truly savage and violent. You know this one has to go to perfection. Next up is Mechanical Animals in 1998. More big singles in Rock is Dead, The Dope Show, and Coma White, which is also great. Once more, I'm also drawn to the less played ones like Posthuman and the drifting Dissociative, which kind of feels like Manson's take on Space Oddity. And New Model Number 15 also reminds me of The Knack. And speaking of Space Odyssey, Manson showing a lot of David Bowie influences on this one, especially on the funky I don't like the drugs, but the drugs like me, right down to the album art, which I remember seeing everywhere as a kid. Similar to the previous album, but with more glam elements that make it feel a little bit more, like, classy in a way, I guess. Not quite as aggressive, but still very dark. It's a bit less consistent too overall, I would say, but I feel like my placement of it varies depending on what mood I'm in. But as far as this stuff goes, it's top 3 for me easily, so I'm also going to put this one in perfection. Then we got Hollywood in the Shadow of the Valley of Death in 2000. The finale of the trilogy, and it's once more packed with classic moments while feeling like a return to the more aggro sound of the earlier records. Big track here in Disposable Teens and Fight Song, both of which got tons of radio play and I remember having on a burned disc. Then there's the more melancholic The Nobodies and yet more fantastic deeper cuts like The Love Song, The Death Song, and Burning Flag. I also love opener God Eat God, which once more sets a delightfully miserable dark tone, and Target Audience follows in the same vein. Now at 19 tracks, it feels a little overstuffed. My one critique is that I think this one would be even better with a little trimming of the fat, but overall it works surprisingly well for the length. It's my second favorite. It is going to perfection. They followed that up with the Golden Age of Grotesque in 2003. The first album with Tim Skold of KMFDM replacing Twiggy Ramirez, and the last with keyboardist Madonna Wayne Gacy and guitarist John Five. As big of a fan as I was at this point, I remember hearing those damn cheerleaders on Mob Scene when that single dropped and just saying, yeah, no. It just feels so corny and try-hard to me and reminds me of the same type of decisions I criticize bands like Ice Nine Kills and Motionless in White for now. Going back to the album, I feel like I can appreciate it more, but it's still not without its problems. This Is the New Shit makes for a decent enough opener. I actually like the instrumentation, but the lyrics do feel a bit recycled, and that main guitar riff is basically just, hey man, nice shot. Dal Dago Whatever the Hell, though catchy, is another one that exemplifies what I don't like about the more mainstream version of his music. It's like too polished and fun instead of sounding dark and dangerous at the same time. Same goes for Vo Devil. I can somewhat enjoy Use Your Fist and Not Your Mouth. Love these titles. Slut Garden, Kaboom Kaboom, and Saint is also pretty good, even if the wordplay seems that it thinks like it's more clever than it actually is. I definitely prefer the more understated moments on here as well. More generally, I just love the sound of the guitar on this album though, so I'm gonna put this one at great tier. Then we got Eat Me, Drink Me in 2007. Made largely by Manson and Tim, Manson said he recorded much of his vocals lying on the ground, and I think that adds to its very depressive, miserable vibe. It's like the polar opposite of the maximalist major production sound of the previous album. Very morose opening in If I Was Your Vampire, but going into Putting Holes in Happiness, I'm not a big fan of the more rock-oriented sounding guitars. Almost has more of like a The Clash sounding tone on a lot of this record, especially on the now somewhat infamous Heart-Shaped Glasses. By the way, I'm not going to talk about any of the controversy in this video, so if you came here for that, don't really bother, because in my opinion, it's none of my business. That's for the courts to decide. But anyways, where Golden Age feels too big, this one seems a bit too simple. It has a very personal sound that feels very genuine on tracks like Justin, A Car Crash Away, but unfortunately that never really translates to me getting fully engaged. Most of the album I get bored and check out, save for a few tracks like Heart-Shaped Glasses, Are You the Rabbit, and You and Me and the Devil Makes Three. I'm putting this one at okay. Then we got the high end of Low in 2009. Notably, this marks the return of Twiggy, who wrote most of the music, with former Nine Inch Nails co-producer and keyboardist Chris Vrenna. Starting on a more engaging note, at least, with Devour, getting some Mechanical Animals vibes on this one, and digging the aggro-electric energy of Pretty as a Swastika. But there's still more thoughtful sounding tracks like Leave a Scar as well this time, more effectively executed, I would say. I also dig the slow burn of I Want to Kill You like they do in the movies, and I Have to Look Up Just to See Hell. Not a huge fan of the singles here, though. They are some of my least favorites, actually, and man, I wish someone would push this man to trim things down. 72 minutes. As always, this would be fine if you can justify it with a well-paced and perfectly crafted runtime. Again, more akin to the earlier stuff, but that's a rare thing, and this is just not really that. It's very inconsistent, but enjoyable enough, so I'm putting it at good tier. We got Born Villain in 2012. By the way, that's one of the very few segments of that music video I can actually show without getting this video demonetized. Getting back to a heavier sound with Hey Cruel World, definitely reminiscent of material from the trilogy. Solid singles in No Reflection and Slow Motion. They feel more balanced instead of either over or underselling. Also enjoy Overneath the Path of Misery, The Flowers of Evil, and the Do Me Lay Down Your Goddamn Arms. Murderers Are Getting Prettier Every Day is also an all-around standout and has some of the faster drumming I miss from the earlier material. I saw some comments saying that they hate this record, but I'd be interested to hear more from you as to why, since I found it to be quite solid if still a bit inconsistent. For me, it went to great tier, but again, this is all just my opinion, it's all subjective, so please do share your own rankings down below. Where do you agree, where do you disagree, and also, if you're enjoying the video, hit the like button. But next up, we have The Pale Emperor in 2015.
You better watch yourself. You better watch yourself.
I recall quite a bit of praise for this album when it came out, but I mostly was busy with other albums at the time, so it took me a while to circle back to it. Opener Killer Strangers once more reminds me of moodier old tracks like The Nobodies, continuing into the equally strong and at times headbang-inducing Deep Six. More hypnotic bass grooves to Third Day of a 7-Day Binge and The Devil Beneath My Feet, and the guitars on Worship My Wreck remind me of the music from 28 Days Later. Great rhythms to Slave Only Dreams to Be King, and Birds of Hell Awaiting is just drenched in gooey attitude. Strong conclusion too with the bluesy swagger of Odds of Even and Cupid Carries a Gun, which was co-written by composer Tyler Bates and used for the show Salem.
Pound me the witch drums, pound me the witch drums.
This feels like more of the personal energy of Eat Me, Drink Me, but with the approach to composition more on par with Mechanical Animals, and I appreciate the tighter runtime too, thank you. It is going to fantastic. Next up is Heaven Upside Down in 2017. This album keeps the more subdued energy of the last album, but feels a little bit less mature, if that makes sense. I dare say he sounds more under the influence as well, but I'm not really a scholar on the drug timeline here. Not a big fan of Revolution number 12. The best part is probably the riff, and that's mostly lifted from Black Sabbath. I also find Kill For Me and Blood Honey to be very cheesy, and it just kind of peters out for me to the end. I do find some enjoyment, though, in most of the other singles and the slithering Saturnalia.
Demons die, even if just one survives.
I'd call this a good chilling album. Like, instead of going for the throat, it sort of lulls you in and casually poisons your drink. I just wish it was more consistently enjoyable, but again, at least it's only 47 minutes, so plus there, it's not going to waste too much of your time. I'm putting it at good tier. Then we got We Are Chaos in 2020.
Garbage Day! Huh? No!
This one is co-produced by Shooter Jennings, of all people, kicking off on a similar note as the last album with the passive-aggressive Red, Black, and Blue, which is decent, but then we transition into the almost John Lennon-sounding schmaltz of We Are Chaos, which I am not a fan of. And this continues into the kind of goth synth-poppy Don't Chase the Dead, and don't get me wrong, I love synth-pop, but this is just not an enjoyable song in my opinion. I really feel like I accidentally stumbled into an alternate reality where Manson came out in the 70s, and I just do not like what I'm hearing with all the sappy, melodic, piano-driven music. It's mostly lame, very boring, but Buddy Chris, who does the written reviews on MetalTrenches.com, he liked it a lot more. So, again, there's room for different opinions here. Me, not into it. It might be my least favorite. It's going to okay. Which brings us to One Assassination Under God, Chapter 1 in 2024. Now, off the bat, I gotta say, what a god-awful title. I have many times bemoaned this edgelord and frankly sophomoric type of turning a common phrase into something try-hard by just changing one word, and I'm just as willing to criticize Manson for it as with the one mutilation under God line from the Motionless in White song. But fortunately, the singles leading up to this one got me pretty excited again. Like, they really felt like Manson playing into my favorite strengths of his. Also cool to see Reba of Code Orange in the music videos and playing on these songs. I think that's a pretty neat fit. Speaking of which, I'm definitely down with the bouncy, dark yet strangely upbeat Sacrilegious, and Sick as the Secrets Within was the solid, slower single which played at the top, bringing a little bit of a Mechanical Animals energy and a very fun synth line. But really it was the former track and equally banging Raise the Red Flag that got me hyped for this album to begin with. Definitely playlist worthy up there with the classics. Moving on from those, it's a little bit of a mixed bag again. Not a huge fan of the opening title track or closer's Sacrifice of the Mass, which feels like we bookend this thing with two of its most mediocre tracks. Not bad, but just kind of meh. I'm also not in love with No Funeral Without Applause or Death Is Not a Costume with the vocal effects, even if it has a pretty infectious bass line, but both of those grew on me over repeat listens. Alternatively, I do greatly enjoy the head bob-inducing bass guitar of Nod If You Understand, and Meet Me in Purgatory is another one that got its hooks in me early with its sort of Interpol and She Wants Revenge passive aggressiveness. Taken as a whole, this is a stronger later career album for Manson with some real standouts and one of the more relatively consistent and restrained runtimes. There are no tracks that I hate, but I'd be lying if I said that the singles didn't leave me wanting more of a return to speed and aggression once again. Maybe I just need to get over that, but I just want it. As such, it still doesn't quite reach the heights of my favorites here. I think it fits kind of perfectly for me on great tier, right sandwiched between these two. Y'all check out this playlist for more alternative rankings, or this one maybe for some new metal, but that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in